2 weeks after I inherited my father's entire estate, my husband served me divorce papers at the breakfast table. But what he didn't know was that my dad had already predicted this and set a trap he would never escape. Hey besties, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into this shocking and educational story, tell me, where are you watching from? US, Canada, UK, Australia, Africa, anywhere else? I love seeing how far my stories travel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It helps me bring you more powerful stories like this one that could change your perspective on trust and family. This is the story of how my father saw something in my husband that I was too in love to notice, and how he used his final act of love to protect me from a man who only wanted what I had, not who I was. The morning my husband handed me divorce papers, I was sitting at our kitchen table drinking coffee. It was a Tuesday, the kind of quiet, ordinary Tuesday where you expect nothing more dramatic than deciding what to make for dinner. The sun was streaming through the window. Birds were chirping outside. Everything felt normal. And then he walked in holding a manila envelope. I looked up and smiled. "Morning, babe. Did you sleep okay?" He didn't smile back. He just stood there in the doorway, holding that envelope like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and I felt my stomach drop before he even said a word. "We need to talk," he said. Those 4 words. The 4 words that always mean your life is about to change. I set down my coffee cup slowly. "Okay, what's going on?" He walked over to the table, pulled out a chair, sat down across from me. And then, without any warning, without any build-up, he slid that manila envelope across the table toward me. "What's this?" I asked, my voice already shaking. "Divorce papers," he said flatly. "I think we both know this marriage isn't working anymore." I stared at him. At this man I'd been married to for 8 years. This man I'd built a life with. This man I'd trusted with everything. And I couldn't breathe. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. "What do you mean it's not working?" "We're fine. We've been fine." He shook his head. "No, we haven't. We've been pretending. And I think it's time we both stop pretending and move on." Move on. Like our marriage was a job he was quitting. Like 8 years together meant nothing. I opened my mouth to argue. To ask him what had changed. To beg him to explain. But before I could say anything, he stood up. "My lawyer will be in touch," he said. "We can split everything fairly. 50-50. It doesn't have to be ugly." And then he walked out. Just like that. No emotion. No explanation. No remorse. I sat there alone in that kitchen, staring at the divorce papers, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold them. And the only thing I could think was, why now? Because 2 weeks ago, everything had changed. 2 weeks ago, my father died. And 2 weeks ago, I inherited his entire estate. Let me back up. Let me tell you about my dad. My father was the most important person in my life. He raised me by himself after my mom passed away when I was 12. He worked 2 jobs to put me through college. He was there for every milestone, every heartbreak, every moment I needed him. He wasn't rich. Not by any stretch. He was a blue-collar worker, a mechanic who owned a small auto shop in our hometown. But he was smart, careful, he saved every penny, he invested wisely, and over the years, he quietly built something. I didn't know how much he had. He never talked about money. He lived modestly, drove an old truck, wore the same work boots for 10 years. But apparently, he'd been planning, preparing, building a safety net for me that I didn't even know existed. When he got sick, when the doctors told us it was stage 4 lung cancer and there was nothing they could do, he didn't fall apart. He got organized. He sat me down one evening in the hospital, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed, and he said, "I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." I remember nodding, tears already streaming down my face because I knew what this conversation meant. This was the beginning of goodbye. "I've set things up for you," he said. "Everything. I have the house, the shop, the investments, the land, it's all going to you. But there are rules." "Rules?" I repeated, confused. "Yes, specific rules. And I need you to promise me you'll follow them exactly. Even if you don't understand why. Even if it doesn't make sense. Can you promise me that?" His eyes were so intense. So serious. Like this was the most important thing he'd ever asked me. "Of course, Dad," I said. I promise. He nodded, satisfied. Good. My lawyer has all the details. When the time comes, he'll explain everything. When the time comes? I whispered. Dad, don't talk like that. Sweetheart. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was weak, but his voice was firm. I need to know you're going to be okay after I'm gone. And the only way I can leave in peace is if I know I've protected you. Protected me from what? He looked at me for a long moment. And I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Just promise me, he said again. Promise you'll do exactly what the lawyer tells you. I promise. He squeezed my hand one more time. And then he closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. 3 weeks later, he was gone. And I was completely, utterly shattered. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't come all at once. It comes in waves. Some days, I'd be fine. Functional. Going through the motions. And then something small, a song on the radio, the smell of motor oil, a memory I wasn't expecting would hit me, and I'd collapse under the weight of it. My husband was supportive. At least, that's what I told myself. He came to the funeral. He held my hand during the service. He helped me sort through Dad's things. But looking back now, I realize he wasn't grieving with me. He was waiting. Waiting for the lawyer to call. Waiting to find out what my father had left behind. Waiting to see if his patience had finally paid off. Because the day after the funeral, when we were sitting in the living room, surrounded by sympathy cards and casserole dishes from neighbors, he asked me a question that should have been a red flag. Did your dad leave a will? I looked up, surprised. I don't know. I assume so. Why? He shrugged, trying to look casual. Just wondering. You know, in case there are things we need to handle. Paperwork. And stuff. The lawyer said he'd contact me when it was time, I said quietly. Dad set everything up before he died. My husband nodded. But I saw something flicker across his face. Something I couldn't quite read. Interest. Anticipation. Calculation. At the time, I thought I was imagining it. Thought grief was making me paranoid. But I wasn't imagining anything. My dad had seen it. Years ago. Long before I did. He'd seen the truth about the man I married. And he'd done something about it. But I didn't understand why my dad was so worried about my husband, until the lawyer opened the envelope he left for me. The last month of my father's life was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. Watching someone you love deteriorate is a special kind of torture. Every day, he got a little weaker. A little more tired. A little further away from the strong, capable man who'd raised me. But even in those final weeks, his mind was sharp, crystal clear. And he was planning something. I could feel it. He'd ask me strange questions when I visited him in the hospital. How's your husband treating you? He'd ask out of nowhere. He's fine, Dad. He's been really supportive. Dad would nod slowly, but his expression never changed, like he didn't quite believe me. Does he ever ask about money? About what I have? I remember laughing at that question. Dad, you don't have to worry about that. We're doing fine financially. And besides, you don't even talk about money. How would he know what you have? People always find out, Dad said quietly. Money has a way of showing itself, even when you try to hide it. I brushed it off. Thought the medication was making him paranoid. But then one evening, about 2 weeks before he died, he asked to speak to me alone. My husband had been there visiting with me, sitting in the corner of the hospital room scrolling through his phone while I held Dad's hand. Dad looked at him and said, "Could you give us a few minutes? I need to talk to my daughter privately." My husband looked up, surprised, maybe even a little annoyed, but he nodded. "Sure, I'll grab some coffee." The moment the door closed behind him, Dad's entire demeanor changed. He sat up straighter. His grip on my hand tightened. "I need you to listen very carefully," he said. "Dad, what's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. But I need to tell you something. And I need you to trust me even if you don't understand." My heart started racing. "You're scaring me." "I've set everything up," he said. "The house, the shop, the investments. The land I bought years ago. All of it is going to you. But I've done it in a very specific way. And there are rules you must follow." "What kind of rules?" He reached over to the bedside table and pulled out a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in his handwriting. "When I'm gone, my lawyer Tom Morrison will contact you. You remember Tom, right? I nodded. Tom had been Dad's lawyer and friend for over 20 years. Good. Tom knows everything. He has all the documents. He'll explain the rules to you when the time comes. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. No matter what your husband says, no matter what he asks for, no matter how much pressure he puts on you, you follow Tom's instructions exactly. Don't deviate. Don't second guess. Don't try to be fair or reasonable. Just do exactly what Tom tells you. Can you promise me that? I stared at him, confused. Dad, why are you talking like this? What do you think is going to happen? His eyes softened. He reached up and touched my cheek. I hope I'm wrong, sweetheart. I really do. But if I'm right, these rules will save you. Save me from what? He didn't answer, just handed me the envelope. Give this to Tom when you meet with him. He'll know what to do. I took the envelope, my hands shaking. Dad, you're really scaring me now. I know, and I'm sorry, but I need to know you're protected, because I won't be here to protect you anymore. Tears started streaming down my face. Don't say that. It's okay, he whispered. I've made my peace with it, but I won't have peace unless I know you're going to be okay. So promise me. Promise me you'll follow the rules. I promise, I said through my tears. I promise, Dad. He pulled me into a hug, and I felt his chest rise and fall with a sigh of relief. Good girl, he whispered. That's my good girl. We sat like that for a long time, me crying into his shoulder, him holding me like he used to when I was little and had nightmares. When my husband came back into the room 10 minutes later, Dad was calm again. Pleasant. He smiled and made small talk like nothing had happened. But I saw the way he watched my husband, the way his eyes tracked every movement, every expression. Like he was studying him. Like he was waiting for something. At the time, I thought it was just a father being protective, being cautious, maybe even being a little unfair. But now I know the truth. My dad wasn't being paranoid. He was being prepared. Because he'd seen something in my husband that I was too in love or too naive to see. He'd seen the greed, the calculation, the patience of a man waiting for the right moment to strike. And my father, in his final act of love, had set a trap. He made me promise to follow his rules exactly, even if I didn't understand them. I had no idea those rules would save me. I met my husband, Derek, 9 years ago at a friend's wedding. He was charming, funny, attentive in a way that made me feel seen. We talked for hours that night about everything and nothing. By the end of the evening, I knew I wanted to see him again. We dated for a year before he proposed, and it was a good year. He took me to nice restaurants, surprised me with flowers, told me I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever met. I fell hard. My dad liked him at first, or at least, he seemed to. He was polite, welcoming. He invited Derek to family dinners and made an effort to get to know him. But about 6 months into our relationship, I noticed my dad pulling back. He'd be quieter when Derek was around, less warm, more observant. One night, after Derek had left, I asked Dad what was wrong. Nothing's wrong, he said. Dad, come on. I can tell something's bothering you. You barely said 2 words to him tonight. Dad sighed, set down the dish he was drying, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Do you love him? He asked. Yes, of course I do. And does he love you? Yes, I said, confused. Why are you asking me this? Dad was quiet for a moment. Then he said, just be careful, sweetheart. Pay attention. Make sure he loves you, not just the life you could give him. I laughed. Dad, I don't have anything to give him. I'm a teacher. I make barely enough to cover my rent. What life could I possibly offer? You'd be surprised, Dad said quietly. Some people see potential where others see security. And they wait. I didn't understand what he meant, and honestly, I thought he was just being an overprotective father, the kind who thinks no man is good enough for his daughter. So I ignored the warning. Derek and I got married the following year. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. Dad walked me down the aisle and smiled the whole time. But when he handed me over to Derek, when he placed my hand in Derek's and stepped back, I saw something flash across his face. Sadness. Resignation. Like he was letting me go into something he couldn't protect me from. I thought it was just normal father of the bride emotion. I was wrong. The first few years of our marriage were good. Or at least, I thought they were. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I taught elementary school. Derek worked in sales. We had a little apartment, a little routine, a little life. But looking back now, I can see the cracks I ignored. Like the way Derek always seemed to know my dad's schedule. "Is your dad working this weekend?" he'd ask casually. Maybe we should visit him. At the time, I thought he was being thoughtful, trying to build a relationship with my father. But now I realize he was gathering information, watching, waiting. Or the way he'd casually ask about dad's auto shop. "How's business? Is he thinking about retiring? What'll happen to the shop when he does?" I'd shrug it off. "I don't know. We don't really talk about that stuff." But Derek kept asking, over and over, always framed as innocent curiosity. And then there was the way he reacted when Dad bought that piece of land. It was about 4 years into our marriage. Dad called me one evening, excited, which was rare for him. He wasn't an excitable man. "I did something today," he said. "Something I've been thinking about for years." "What?" "I bought some land. About 40 acres just outside of town. Beautiful spot. Has a little creek running through it. I'm thinking maybe one day I'll build a cabin there. Retire. Fish. Relax." I was thrilled for him. "Dad, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you." When I told Derek that night, his eyes lit up. 40 acres? That must have cost a fortune." "I don't think so. It's pretty remote. Dad said he got a good deal." "Still," Derek said, leaning back on the couch with a strange smile. "Your dad must have more money than we thought if he's buying land." "He's been saving his whole life," I said. "And he deserves it. He worked hard." "Yeah," Derek agreed. But there was something in his voice. Something I couldn't quite place. Interest. Excitement. Greed. And from that moment on, Derek started paying even more attention to my dad. Visiting more. Asking more questions. Being more involved. At the time, I thought he was finally bonding with him. But my dad saw right through it. I remember one Sunday afternoon, Derek and I had driven out to visit Dad at his shop. Derek spent the whole time asking about the business. About the property. About Dad's plans for the future. After Derek stepped outside to take a phone call, Dad turned to me and said, "He's awfully interested in my finances." I laughed. "He's just trying to connect with you, Dad. He knows how important you are to me." Dad didn't laugh. He just looked at me with that same sad expression and said, "I hope you're right, sweetheart. I really do." But he wasn't. And deep down, even then, I think I knew it. I just didn't want to believe it. Because believing it would mean admitting I'd married someone who didn't love me. Someone who was waiting, watching, calculating. My dad noticed something in him long before I did, and he tried to warn me. My father died on a Thursday morning. I was there, holding his hand, watching the monitors slow down, listening to the nurses speak in soft, gentle voices. And then, just like that, he was gone. The strongest man I'd ever known. The person who'd been my entire world. Gone. I don't remember much about the next few days. It's all a blur of paperwork and phone calls and people hugging me and saying things like he's in a better place, and at least he's not suffering anymore. None of it helped. The funeral was small. Dad had specifically requested that. Just close friends and family. No fuss. No drama. Derek stood beside me the entire time, his arm around my shoulders. To anyone watching, he looked like the perfect supportive husband. But I felt disconnected, like I was watching everything happen from a distance. The day after the funeral, I couldn't get out of bed. The weight of the grief was too much. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how to exist in a world without my father. Derek brought me tea. Sat on the edge of the bed. "I know this is hard," he said. "But we'll get through it together." I nodded but didn't respond. "Have you heard from your dad's lawyer yet?" he asked. I looked at him. "Why?" "Just wondering. I'm sure there are things that need to be handled. The house. The shop. You know. Tom said he'd call when it was time," I said quietly. Derek nodded. But I saw that flicker again. That look of anticipation. 3 days later, Tom Morrison called. I was sitting on the couch, wrapped in one of my dad's old sweatshirts, when my phone rang. Hello? Hi, sweetheart. It's Tom. Hi, Tom. My voice cracked. Just hearing him say sweetheart, the same way my dad used to, made me want to cry all over again. I know this is a difficult time, Tom said gently. But I need to meet with you. Your father left very specific instructions. Urgently. Urgently? I repeated. Why urgently? It's complicated. But your father was very clear. He wanted me to meet with you as soon as possible after his passing. Are you available tomorrow? Yes, I think so. Good. Come to my office at 10 a.m. And sweetheart? Yeah? Come alone. My stomach twisted. Alone? Why? Your father's instructions. I'll explain everything when you get here. I hung up, my hands shaking. Derek walked into the room. Who was that? Tom, Dad's lawyer. He wants to meet with me tomorrow. Derek's eyes lit up. About the will? I guess so. I'll come with you, he said immediately. He said I should come alone. Derek frowned. Why? I don't know, that's just what he said. That's weird, Derek muttered. What could your dad possibly need to say that I can't hear? I didn't have an answer. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about that envelope Dad had given me in the hospital. The one with my name on it. The one I was supposed to give to Tom. I tucked it into my purse and carried it with me every day since Dad died. Like a talisman, like proof that he'd thought of everything, even from beyond the grave. The next morning, I got dressed and drove to Tom's office. The whole drive, my stomach was in knots. When I walked into his office, Tom stood up immediately and pulled me into a hug. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Your dad was one of the best men I ever knew. Thank you, I whispered. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. We have a lot to go over. I sat down and pulled the envelope out of my purse. Dad told me to give you this. Tom took it and smiled sadly. Of course he did. That man thought of everything. He opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Read it silently. And then he looked up at me with an expression I'll never forget. Sadness, respect, and something else. Pride. Your father, Tom said slowly, was a very smart man. I know. And he loved you more than anything in this world. I know that too. Tom set the letter down and folded his hands on the desk. What I'm about to tell you is going to be shocking. And maybe even painful. But I need you to trust me. And more importantly, I need you to trust your father. Can you do that? My heart was pounding. Yes. Tom took a deep breath. And then he slid a thick file across the table and said, Your father predicted what's about to happen to you. The lawyer slid a thick file across the table and said, Your father predicted what's about to happen to you. I stared at the thick file on Tom's desk. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. What do you mean he predicted what's about to happen to me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Tom opened the file and pulled out several documents, legal papers, bank statements, property deeds, things I'd never seen before. Your father, Tom began carefully, spent the last 5 years of his life preparing for this moment. He knew that when he died, everything would change. And he wanted to make sure you were protected. Protected from what? Tom looked at me with gentle, sad eyes. From your husband. The words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked. What? Tom, that's crazy. Derek has been nothing but supportive. Has he? Tom interrupted gently. Or has he been waiting? I opened my mouth to argue, but no words came out. Because deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew what Tom was saying might be true. Let me show you something, Tom said. He pulled out a document and slid it across the desk. This is your father's estate inventory, everything he owned at the time of his death. I looked down at the paper, and my breath caught in my throat. The house, paid off, valued at $580,000. The auto shop, owned outright, valued at $320,000, including equipment and land. Investment portfolio, $1.2 million. Savings accounts, $340,000. The 40 acres of land, valued at $750,000 due to recent commercial development in the area. Rental properties I didn't even know he owned. 3 homes, collectively valued at $890,000. I did the math in my head, over and over, because it couldn't be right. Tom, I whispered, this says my dad was worth almost $4 million. Tom nodded, 3.8 million, to be exact. Your father was a very smart investor. He lived modestly, saved aggressively, and made wise decisions. He built this over 40 years. I felt like I was going to pass out. I had no idea. He never said anything. That's because he didn't want anyone to know, Tom said. Especially not your husband. Why? Why would he hide this from me? Tom leaned back in his chair. Because about 5 years ago, your father started noticing things. Small things. The way Derek asked questions. The way he paid attention whenever money was mentioned. The way he became more interested in your dad's business after he bought that land. I remembered. Derek had become more attentive after that. More involved. Your father came to me, Tom continued, and said he was worried. He said he didn't trust Derek. He thought Derek might be opportunistic. The word hit me like a slap. So what did he do? I asked. He set up a plan. A very specific, very strategic plan to protect you and everything he'd built. Tom pulled out another document. Every single asset your father owned has been placed into an irrevocable trust. Do you know what that means? I shook my head. It means that legally, you inherited everything. The house, the businesses, the investments, all of it is yours, but it's protected. It cannot be touched by anyone else, not in a divorce, not in a lawsuit, not in any legal proceeding. It's completely, entirely, untouchably, yours. I stared at him, my mind racing. So if Derek and I got divorced, he would get nothing, Tom said firmly. Not a single dollar. Because legally, your inheritance is not considered marital property. It was never commingled with marital funds. It was placed directly into a trust with you as the sole beneficiary. I felt tears starting to stream down my face, not from sadness, from something else. Gratitude, relief, and a heartbreak so deep it felt like my chest was caving in. My dad did this, I whispered. He knew. He suspected. Tom corrected gently. He hoped he was wrong. But he wanted to make sure that if he wasn't, you'd be okay. I covered my face with my hands and sobbed. Because my father even in death was still protecting me, still taking care of me, still making sure I'd be safe. Tom waited patiently until I could breathe again. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. There's one more thing you need to know. I looked up, wiping my eyes. Your father left me a letter, Tom said, with very specific instructions about what to do next. And he was very clear about the timeline. What timeline? Tom pulled out another piece of paper. My father's handwriting. I recognized it immediately, the careful, neat script he'd always used. Your father predicted, Tom said slowly, that within 2 to 4 weeks of your inheriting his estate, your husband would file for divorce. My heart stopped. He what? He predicted this exact scenario. He wrote it down, dated it, sealed it, and he told me that when it happened, not if, but when I was to follow a very specific set of instructions. I couldn't breathe. Tom, that's insane. Derek wouldn't. And then I stopped. Because I remembered the way Derek had asked about the will, the way his eyes had lit up when Tom called, the way he'd wanted to come to this meeting, the way he'd been waiting. When did your father write this letter? I asked quietly. Tom checked the date. 4 years ago. Right after you told him about the land purchase. 4 years. My dad had been planning this for 4 years. I looked down at the documents spread across the desk. At the evidence of my father's love. His foresight. His determination to protect me even after he was gone. And I felt something shift inside me. Not just grief anymore. Clarity. What are the instructions? I asked. Tom smiled. A small, sad smile. That's my girl. Your father said you'd be strong enough to handle this. He pulled out a folder labeled with my name. These are the rules your father wanted you to follow. You must follow them exactly. No deviation, no improvisation. Can you do that? I thought about the promise I'd made to my dad in that hospital room. The promise to trust him. To follow his rules no matter what. Yes, I said firmly. I can do that. Tom nodded, satisfied. Good. Because what happens next is going to be hard. But if you do exactly what your father planned, you're going to walk away from this protected, empowered, and free. He opened the folder. And that's when I saw the full scope of my father's plan. But then the lawyer said something that made my blood run cold. I left Tom's office in a daze. The information was too much. Too overwhelming. My father, my quiet, modest father, had been a millionaire. And he'd built an entire legal fortress around his assets to protect me. From my husband. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just staring at nothing, trying to process it all. Tom's words kept echoing in my head. Your father predicted that within 2 to 4 weeks of your inheriting his estate, your husband would file for divorce. It seemed impossible, paranoid, like something out of a movie. But Tom had been so certain, and my dad had been so specific. I wanted to believe they were wrong, that Derek loved me, that our marriage meant something. But doubt had already planted itself in my mind, and it was growing. When I got home, Derek was waiting for me in the living room. He stood up the moment I walked through the door. How'd it go? He asked, trying to sound casual. But I could hear the eagerness underneath. The anticipation. It was. A lot, I said carefully. What do you mean? I set my purse down and walked into the kitchen, needing space, needing time to think. Dad left me some things. The house, the shop, some investments. Derek followed me. That's great. I mean, obviously it's sad that he's gone, but at least he took care of you. Yeah, I said quietly. So what's the plan? Derek asked, leaning against the counter. It might be smart to liquidate everything and invest it somewhere more profitable. I looked at him. Really looked at him. We? He blinked. What? You said we. Are we going to sell? Like it's ours. Well, yeah, he said, looking confused. We're married. What's yours is mine, right? That's how it works. Something cold settled in my chest. Tom said I need some time to figure things out, I said carefully. He's handling all the legal stuff. I'm not making any big decisions right now. Derek's expression flickered, just for a second, frustration, impatience. But then he smiled. Of course, take all the time you need. I'm just saying, when you're ready, we should probably sit down and talk about our options. Your dad worked hard for this. We should make smart choices. Our options, our choices. He kept saying we. Over the next few days, it got worse. Derek started asking questions. Constant questions. Did the lawyer say how much everything is worth? What about the land? Is that part of the estate? Did your dad have life insurance? Are there any debts we need to worry about? Every conversation circled back to money, to assets, to what I'd inherited. He tried to be subtle about it, tried to frame it as concern, as being practical. But I could see through it now, because my father had opened my eyes. One evening, about a week after my meeting with Tom, Derek brought it up again. We were sitting at dinner takeout, because I hadn't had the energy to cook, and he said, I've been thinking, maybe we should meet with a financial advisor. Someone who can help us manage everything your dad left you. I have Tom, I said. Tom's a lawyer, not a financial planner. We need someone who specializes in wealth management. Wealth management. Like I was some kind of heiress. I'm not ready to think about that yet, I said. Derek set down his fork. Babe, I get that you're grieving. I do. But we can't just sit on this. Your dad would want you to be smart with his money. You didn't even like my dad, I said before I could stop myself. Derek's face hardened. You barely spoke to him unless you were asking him about his business. I was trying to bond with him, or trying to figure out what he was worth. The words came out sharper than I intended. But I couldn't take them back. And honestly, I didn't want to. Derek stared at me. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, standing up. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. I left him sitting there, stunned and angry. That night, lying in bed, I heard him on the phone in the other room. His voice was low, but I could make out pieces of the conversation. Yeah, she inherited everything. I don't know exactly how much yet, but it's significant. She's being weird about it. Won't talk to me about specifics. I'm working on it. My stomach turned. Who was he talking to? And why was he discussing my inheritance with anyone? The next morning, I woke up to find Derek already dressed. Suit and tie. Like he was going somewhere important. Where are you going? I asked. Meeting with a lawyer, he said casually. My blood ran cold. A lawyer? Why? Just to discuss our options. Financial planning stuff. I made an appointment last week. Without telling me? He shrugged. I didn't think it was a big deal. I'm just trying to help. But I knew. In that moment, I knew. My father had been right. And everything was about to fall apart. And the next morning, he served me divorce papers. That brings me back to where this story started. The Tuesday morning when Derek walked into the kitchen holding a manila envelope and said, "We need to talk." The moment he slid those divorce papers across the table, I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. But underneath the shock, underneath the heartbreak, there was something else. Clarity. Because my father had predicted this, down to the timeline, down to the moment. I don't understand, I said, my voice shaking. Where is this coming from? Derek sat back in his chair, arms crossed. I've been thinking about this for a while. We're not happy, you know that. I didn't know that, I said. I thought we were fine. We've been pretending, he said flatly. And I'm done pretending. So you wait until 2 weeks after my father dies to tell me this? My voice was rising now. 2 weeks after I inherit everything he worked for? Derek's jaw tightened. This has nothing to do with your inheritance. Doesn't it? No. But he wouldn't look at me. This is about us. About the fact that we've grown apart. We want different things. What do you want, Derek? He finally looked up. And what I saw in his eyes made my stomach turn. Greed. Calculation. Entitlement. I want what's fair, he said. We've been married for 8 years. We've built a life together. And in a divorce, that means splitting things 50-50. Splitting what? Assets, he said simply. The house, the business, the investments. Everything your father left you. We split it equally. I stared at him. You want half of my inheritance? It's not about what I want, he said, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality, like he'd practiced this speech. It's about what's legally fair. We're married. In this state, marital assets are divided equally in a divorce. My father's estate isn't a marital asset. Derek smiled, a cold, calculating smile. Actually, it is. Anything acquired during a marriage is considered marital property. Your lawyer will tell you the same thing, but he was wrong. And I knew he was wrong, because my father had made sure of it. I need to call Tom, I said, standing up. Go ahead, Derek said, leaning back with confidence. But it's not going to change anything. My lawyer already looked into it. You inherited that money while we were married. That makes it marital property. I walked out of the kitchen without another word, went into the bedroom, locked the door, and called Tom. He answered on the first ring. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. He did it, I said, my voice breaking. He filed for divorce, just like Dad said he would. I know. His lawyer contacted me this morning. Tom, he wants half of everything. He says the inheritance is marital property. It's not. He seems very confident that it is. That's because he doesn't know what your father did. Tom's voice was calm. Steady. Listen to me. Do not panic. Do not engage. Do not argue with him. Your father prepared for this. Every detail. Every possibility. What do I do? You follow the rules, Tom said. Exactly as your father laid out. Can you do that? I took a deep breath. Thought about my dad. About the man who'd spent 4 years building a fortress around me. Yes, I said. I can do that. Good. Come to my office this afternoon. 3 o'clock. We're going to set everything in motion. I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding. From the other side of the door, I heard Derek moving around, whistling. Like he didn't have a care in the world. Like he'd already won. But he hadn't. Because my father, brilliant, careful, loving, had seen this coming. And he'd left me the one thing Derek never expected. A way out. If you're invested in this story, Please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep sharing these powerful stories that teach us to trust our instincts and protect what matters most. But my dad had prepared for this moment long before he died. That afternoon, I sat across from Tom in his office for the second time in 2 weeks. But this time, I wasn't grieving and confused. I was angry, hurt, and ready to fight. "Tell me everything," I said. Tom nodded and pulled out that same thick file from before. "Your father spent 4 years preparing for this exact moment. He knew, or at least strongly suspected, that if you inherited significant assets, your husband would show his true colors. He was right. He usually was," Tom said with a sad smile. "So let me explain exactly what your father did, and why Derek's lawyer is about to have a very bad day." He spread several documents across the desk. "First, let's talk about the trust. Your father created what's called an irrevocable trust 5 years ago. Do you remember him asking you to sign some papers around that time?" I thought back. Vaguely. He said it was just estate planning stuff, that I was listed as a beneficiary. "You weren't just listed as a beneficiary," Tom said. "You were named as the sole beneficiary. Every single asset your father owned, the house, the shop, the investments, the land, the rental properties, all of it was transferred into this trust before he died." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that legally, your father didn't own any of those assets at the time of his death. The trust did. And when he died, the trust passed directly to you, completely outside of probate, completely outside of any marital property laws." I leaned forward. "So Derek can't touch it?" "Not a single penny," Tom confirmed. "In the eyes of the law, you didn't inherit marital property. You received a distribution from a trust that was established before your marriage bore any legal claim to it. The assets were never commingled with marital funds. They were never joint property. They exist in a completely separate legal entity that your husband has zero claim to." I felt something loosen in my chest. Hope. Relief. "But Derek's lawyer told him it counts as marital property because I received it during our marriage." Tom smiled. A cold, professional smile. "Derek's lawyer is either incompetent or lying to him. And my money's on lying, because any competent attorney would know that inherited assets held in trust are explicitly protected from division in divorce proceedings, especially when the trust was established with clear intent to keep those assets separate. So, what happens now? Now, we respond to his divorce filing. We provide documentation of the trust. We make it abundantly clear that he has no legal right to any of your inheritance. And we watch his case fall apart." I sat back in my chair, processing. My dad really thought of everything. He did. But there's more. More? Tom pulled out another document. "Your father didn't just protect your assets. He also left instructions for how to handle the divorce itself. Very specific instructions." He slid a handwritten letter across the desk. My father's handwriting again. I picked it up with shaking hands and read, "My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, it means I was right, and I wish to God I wasn't. It means the man you married has shown you who he really is, and I know how much that must hurt. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. But I need you to be strong now. Stronger than you've ever been. Tom will handle the legal side. Trust him. He knows everything. But there are some things only you can do. First, do not let Derek know about the trust yet. Let him think he has a case. Let him think he's going to get half of everything. Let his lawyer file motions and make demands. The more confident he is, the bigger his fall will be. Second, document everything. Every conversation. Every text message. Every time he asks about money or assets. Save it all. It will matter. Third, stay calm. I know you're hurt. I know you're angry. But don't let him see it. Be polite. Be civil. Let him think you're scared and confused. Because when the time comes, when his lawyer finally sees the trust documents and realizes there's nothing to fight for, I want you to watch his face. I want you to see the exact moment he realizes he's lost. Not because I want you to be cruel, but because I want you to see clearly, to see him for who he really is. So you never doubt your decision to walk away. I love you, sweetheart, more than anything in this world. And I'm sorry I can't be there to protect you myself. But I did the next best thing. I made sure you could protect yourself. Love always. Dad? By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. He knew, I whispered. He knew exactly how this would feel. Tom handed me a tissue. Your father loved you more than life itself. Everything he did was to make sure you'd be okay when he couldn't be there anymore. I wiped my eyes and looked up. So, what do we do? Follow his instructions? Exactly. We let Derek and his lawyer proceed with their case. We don't reveal the trust documents yet. We let them waste time and money building a case that has no foundation. And when the moment is right, when they've committed fully to their strategy, we pull the rug out from under them. How long will that take? A few weeks? Maybe a month? Derek's lawyer will file for temporary support, asset disclosure, all the standard motions. We'll respond professionally but minimally, and we'll wait. For what? Tom smiled. For them to overplay their hand. Your father predicted that Derek would get greedy, that he'd push too hard, demand too much, and when he does, we'll have everything we need. I took a deep breath. It felt manipulative, strategic, not like me at all. But my father had asked me to trust him, and I would. Okay, I said. I'll do it, exactly like he said. Good girl, Tom said, echoing my father's words. Now, there's one more thing. What? He pulled out a sealed envelope. Smaller than the others. My name written on the front in my father's handwriting. Your father told me to give you this after you agreed to follow his plan. He said it would help you stay strong. I took the envelope with shaking hands, opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me and my dad from about 10 years ago, before I'd even met Derek. We were at his auto shop, both of us covered in grease, laughing at something. I remembered that day. He'd been teaching me how to change oil. I'd spilled a whole container on myself, and we'd laughed until we cried. On the back, in his handwriting, remember who you were before him. That girl is still in there, and she's stronger than you think. I clutched the photo to my chest and cried. Because my father had known. He'd known I would doubt myself, would question whether I was strong enough to do this. And he'd left me a reminder. I wasn't just fighting for the inheritance, I was fighting for myself, for the girl I used to be, for the woman my father raised me to become. When I finally composed myself, I looked at Tom and said, I'm ready. Tell me exactly what to do. Tom nodded, satisfied. First, you go home. You act normal. You let Derek think he's in control. You document everything, like your father said. And you wait for my signal. And then? Then we spring the trap. I stood up to leave, the photo still in my hand. As I reached the door, Tom called out, Your father would be so proud of you right now. You know that, right? I turned back and smiled through my tears. I hope so. I know so. I walked out of that office with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Purpose. My father had given me a gift. Not just money. Not just security. He'd given me a way to reclaim my power. And I wasn't going to waste it. But that wasn't even the biggest shock. Dad left a letter. The next few days were some of the strangest of my life. I went home after my meeting with Tom and found Derek in the living room, looking through paperwork, spreadsheets, financial documents. He'd clearly been going through our files, calculating, planning. When I walked in, he looked up and tried to smile. Hey, how'd the meeting go? Fine, I said carefully. Just legal stuff. Tom's handling everything. Did he explain how the division of assets will work? I almost laughed. He couldn't even wait 5 minutes before bringing it up. He said it's complicated. That there are a lot of factors to consider. Derek's eyes narrowed slightly. It's not that complicated. It's a 50-50 split. That's how divorce works in this state. I shrugged, playing dumb. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just doing what Tom tells me to do. I could see Derek's frustration building. He wanted me to engage, to fight, to give him information. But I remembered my father's letter. Stay calm. Be polite. Let him think you're scared and confused. So that's what I did. Over the next week, Derek's behavior became more telling. He started treating me differently. Not with kindness or sympathy, but with a strange mix of impatience and false concern. We should really talk about this, he'd say. Get everything settled quickly, so we can both move on. I'm not ready to talk about it yet, I'd respond quietly. I'm still grieving my dad. I understand that, but we can't put our lives on hold indefinitely. We need to be practical. Practical. That was his favorite word now. He'd also started spending more time on his phone, having hushed conversations in other rooms, coming and going at odd hours, and I documented everything, just like Dad said. I kept a journal, noted dates and times, saved text messages, recorded conversations when it was legal to do so. Derek had no idea I was building a case. He thought I was just a grieving widow, too overwhelmed to think straight. And I let him think that. But at night, when I was alone in the guest bedroom, I'd moved out of our shared room the day he served me papers, I would take out that photograph my dad had left me, the one of us laughing at his shop, and I would remember who I was. Not Derek's wife, not someone to be manipulated or used, but my father's daughter, strong, smart, capable. About 10 days after Derek served me the papers, Tom called. His lawyer just filed a motion for temporary spousal support and an injunction preventing you from selling or transferring any assets. What does that mean? It means they're getting aggressive. They want to lock down everything before the case proceeds. It's a standard move, but it shows they're confident. Good, I said. Tom chuckled. You sound like your father. He said you'd be tougher than people expected. When do we respond? Next week. I'll file a counter motion. But I still won't mention the trust. Not yet. Let them dig deeper. Let them commit. How much longer? Soon, Tom promised. Very soon. That night, Derek came home late. He'd been out with his lawyer again, at least that's what he told me. He found me in the kitchen making tea. We need to talk, he said. I'd heard that phrase so many times in the past 2 weeks, I was sick of it. Okay. He sat down at the table. My lawyer thinks we should try mediation. Work this out without going to court. It'll be faster. Cheaper. Better for both of us. What does Tom think? Derek's jaw tightened. I don't care what Tom thinks. I care what you think. This is our marriage, our assets. We should be able to work this out like adults. What exactly are you proposing? Simple. We split everything down the middle. The house your dad left you, we sell it and split the proceeds. Same with the shop, the investments, all of it. Clean break. We both walk away with enough to start over. I looked at him. Really looked at him. At this man I'd spent 8 years with, and I felt nothing. No love. No anger. Just a strange, detached clarity. I'll think about it, I said. What's there to think about? His voice was rising now. Frustration bleeding through. It's fair. It's reasonable. Why are you making this so difficult? I'm not making anything difficult. I'm just being careful. My dad's estate is complicated. Tom says I need to understand everything before making decisions. Your dad's dead, Derek snapped. Then he caught himself, softened his voice. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I just mean, he's gone. And you need to think about your future now. Our futures. There was no our future. There hadn't been for a long time. Maybe there never was. I'm going to bed, I said, walking past him. He grabbed my arm. Not hard, but firm enough to stop me. Don't shut me out, he said. I'm still your husband. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. Not for much longer, I said quietly. I pulled my arm free and walked away. Behind me, I heard him slam his fist on the table, heard him curse under his breath. And I smiled. Because he was starting to lose control, starting to show his true self, just like my father predicted. The next morning I got a text from Tom. Come to the office. Now. It's time. My heart started racing. I grabbed my purse and drove straight there. When I walked into Tom's office, he was sitting at his desk with a stack of papers and a look of grim satisfaction. Derek's lawyer just filed an emergency motion, he said. They're demanding full financial disclosure. They want to see every document, every account, every asset related to your father's estate. What did you tell them? Tom smiled. I told them we'd be happy to provide full disclosure. And I'm scheduling a meeting for next week. Derek, his lawyer, you, and me, all in one room. You're going to tell them about the trust? I'm going to show them the trust. Every single document, every single clause that proves they have no case. And then we watch them realize they've wasted weeks of time and thousands of dollars on a case they never had a chance of winning. I sat down, My legs suddenly weak. It's really happening. It's really happening. Your father's plan is about to come to fruition. Are you ready? I thought about that letter. About my father's words. About the trap he'd set. Yes, I said. I'm ready. Tom nodded. Good. Because next week, everything changes. I went home that day feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. Not because I wanted to hurt Derek, not because I wanted revenge, but because I was finally seeing clearly. My father had given me more than money. He'd given me the tools to recognize manipulation, to spot greed, to protect myself from people who didn't have my best interests at heart. And I was about to use every single one of those tools. And then I got to the last line, and everything suddenly made sense. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m., in Tom's conference room. I spent the days leading up to it in a strange state of calm. Not the numbness I'd felt right after my father died, but a focused, clear-headed determination. I knew what was coming. Derek didn't. The night before the meeting, Derek was unusually quiet. He'd been distant all week, probably coaching with his lawyer, planning his strategy. At dinner takeout again, neither of us had the energy or desire to cook for each other anymore. He tried one last time. Tomorrow's a big day, he said. I know. My lawyer thinks this will go smoothly. We present our case, you present yours, and we find middle ground. I took a sip of water. We'll see. I just want you to know, he said, and his voice took on that false sincerity I'd come to recognize. I don't want this to get ugly. I still care about you. I want us both to come out of this okay. I looked at him, at the man who'd promised to love me in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, who'd waited for richer, and then immediately filed for divorce. Sure, I said. He frowned, frustrated by my lack of engagement. But he didn't push. He was saving it for tomorrow. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my father's photograph on the nightstand beside me. I hope I'm doing this right, Dad, I whispered into the darkness. I hope you're proud of me. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Not too formal, not too casual. I wanted to look composed, in control. I arrived at Tom's office 15 minutes early. He was already there, the conference room set up with neat stacks of documents. How are you feeling? He asked. Nervous, but ready. Good. Remember, let me do the talking. You just sit there and stay calm. No matter what Derek or his lawyer says, don't react. Can you do that? Yes. Your father believed you could handle this. So do I. At exactly 2 p.m., Derek arrived with his lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit named Patricia Holloway. She had a reputation for being aggressive in divorce cases. Derek wouldn't meet my eyes when he walked in. He looked uncomfortable, maybe even guilty. Good. We all sat down. Tom at one end of the table, Patricia at the other. Derek and I on opposite sides. Patricia started. Thank you for meeting with us. My client is hoping we can resolve this matter quickly and fairly. He's prepared to be very reasonable about the division of assets. I'm sure he is, Tom said mildly. Patricia pulled out a folder. We've prepared a preliminary asset division proposal. As you can see, we're suggesting a 50-50 split of all marital property, including the estate inherited from Mr. Harrison. She slid the document across the table to Tom. He glanced at it, didn't even pick it up, just looked at it and smiled. That's an interesting proposal, Tom said. Unfortunately, it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the law. Patricia's eyes narrowed. I'm quite familiar with marital property law in this state. I'm sure you are, but you seem to be unaware of the specific circumstances of this case. What circumstances? Tom pulled out his own folder, much thicker than hers. The circumstances created by Mr. Harrison before his death. He opened the folder and pulled out the first document. This is an irrevocable trust, established 5 years ago by Mr. Harrison. Every asset he owned, the house, the auto shop, the investment accounts, the land, the rental properties, was transferred into this trust prior to his death. Patricia took the document. I watched her face as she read, watched the confidence slowly drain away. This trust, Tom continued, names my client as the sole beneficiary. The assets were never part of Mr. Harrison's probate estate. They were distributed directly to my client through the trust, completely outside of any marital property considerations. Assets acquired during a marriage, Patricia started, are only considered marital property if they're commingled with marital funds or acquired through marital labor. Tom interrupted smoothly. These assets were neither. They were held in a separate trust, funded entirely with Mr. Harrison's pre-marital assets, and distributed upon his death according to the terms of that trust. He slid another document across the table. This is the trust agreement. As you can see, it explicitly states that the assets are to be held separately and are not subject to claims by any spouse of the beneficiary. Patricia was reading quickly now, her expression growing grimmer. Derek was watching her, confused. What does this mean? She didn't answer him. She was too busy reading. Tom pulled out another document. This is case law from this state supporting the protection of inherited assets held in trust. And this, another document, is a letter from Mr. Harrison to my firm, dated 4 years ago, explicitly stating his intent to protect these assets from any future claims. The conference room was silent except for the rustling of papers. Finally, Patricia looked up. She glanced at Derek, then back at Tom. You're saying the estate isn't marital property. I'm saying it's completely, legally, and irrevocably protected from any division in this divorce. Your client has no claim to it, not a single dollar. Derek's face went white. What? That can't be right. Patricia, you said. I said, assets acquired during a marriage are generally marital property, she said tightly. But if they were properly held in trust, that changes things. Changes things how? She looked at him, and I saw pity in her eyes. It means you have no case. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek turned to me. You knew about this. I didn't respond. Just sat there, calm, exactly like my father had instructed. You've known this whole time. His voice was rising. And you let us, he turned to Patricia. We've been working on this for weeks. You've been billing me for weeks. Mr. Holloway, Patricia said carefully, if you'd been honest about the nature of your wife's inheritance from the beginning. I was honest. I told you she inherited everything. You didn't mention a trust. You said she inherited property directly. Because I didn't know about a trust. He turned back to me, his face red. Did you know? Did you know the whole time? I met his eyes. And for the first time in this entire ordeal, I smiled. Yes, I said quietly. I knew. And in that moment, I saw it. The exact moment my father had wanted me to see. The moment Derek realized he'd lost. Not just the money, not just the case, but the game he'd been playing for years. My husband thought he was winning. He had no idea he was walking straight into my dad's trap. The conference room felt like it was shrinking. Derek's face had gone from white to red, his hands clenched into fists on the table. Patricia was shuffling through the trust documents, her professional composure cracking as she realized the magnitude of her miscalculation. And I just sat there, watching, waiting. Tom leaned back in his chair, perfectly calm. Now, Miss Holloway, if you'd like to proceed with the divorce on the actual marital assets, which consist of the joint checking account with approximately $3,400, the 2019 Honda Civic in your client's name, and the furniture in the marital home, we can certainly discuss equitable division. Patricia didn't respond. She was still reading. Derek slammed his hand on the table. This is bullshit. Mr. Holloway, Tom said evenly. I understand you're upset, but the law is quite clear. I don't care about the law, Derek shouted. That money should be mine. I've been married to her for 8 years. 8 years! I've put up with her family, her father's constant judgment, her boring job and her boring life, and now that there's finally something worth having, you're telling me I get nothing? The mask was completely off now. Patricia put a hand on his arm. Derek, stop talking. He shook her off. No! I'm done being quiet. He turned to me, his eyes blazing. You think you're so smart? You think your dead father outsmarted me? He was a paranoid old man who never thought I was good enough for you. He was right, I said quietly. That stopped him. Just for a second. What? He was right, I repeated, my voice steady. You were never good enough for me, and he knew it, years before I did. Derek's jaw clenched. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing. I interrupted. You gave me lies. You gave me manipulation. You stayed in this marriage waiting for my father to die so you could cash in. And the saddest part? I actually loved you. I actually thought we had something real. We did have something real. No, I shook my head. We had a transaction. I just didn't know it. Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what? Fine. Keep the money, keep everything. I don't need you or your father's blood money. Sit down, Derek, Patricia said sharply. Why? There's nothing left to discuss. She's made it very clear. Sit down. Patricia's voice was ice. Derek sat, sulking like a child who'd been denied a toy. Patricia took a breath and turned to Tom. Assuming everything you've presented is accurate and I'll need time to review it thoroughly, what are you proposing? Simple, Tom said. We proceed with an uncontested divorce. We divide the actual marital assets minimal as they are. Your client walks away with his personal belongings, his vehicle, and half of the joint checking account. My client keeps everything held in the trust, which was never marital property to begin with. Clean, simple, done. That's not fair, Derek muttered. Fair? I couldn't help myself. The word came out sharp. You want to talk about fair? Don't, Tom said gently, putting a hand on my arm. But I was done being quiet. You filed for divorce 2 weeks after my father died, I said, my voice shaking. 2 weeks. While I was still crying myself to sleep every night, while I was still trying to figure out how to exist without him. You looked at me across the breakfast table and handed me papers like our marriage was a business deal that wasn't profitable anymore. That's not. You asked me about his will before we'd even had the funeral, I continued. You started calling lawyers before we'd cleaned out his hospital room. You've spent the past month calculating and planning and strategizing how to take half of everything my father worked 40 years to build. And you want to talk to me about fair? Derek's face was red again, but he didn't respond. My father saw you, I said quietly. He saw exactly who you were. And he tried to warn me, but I didn't listen. Because I loved you. Because I thought you loved me. I did love you. No, I said firmly. You loved what you thought I would inherit. And the moment you found out it was real, the moment the money became tangible, you couldn't even wait a month before showing me your true colors. Patricia cleared her throat. Mrs. Holloway, I think. I'm not Mrs. Holloway anymore, I said. I'll be going back to my maiden name. Harrison. Like my father. Derek laughed bitterly. Of course you will. Run right back to Daddy. Oh wait, you can't, because he's dead. And you're going to end up alone with all that money and no one to share it with. And there it was. The cruelty. The pettiness. The real Derek that my father had seen lurking beneath the charm. But instead of hurting me, his words did something else. They freed me. Because I realized in that moment that being alone was infinitely better than being with someone who saw me as a transaction. You're right, I said calmly. I will be alone. And I'll take that over being with you any day of the week. Tom pulled out another document. For the record, I've been recording this meeting. With everyone's consent, which was granted when you signed in at reception. Derek's eyes widened. What? The consent form you both signed when you arrived included permission to record for legal purposes. And I think this recording clearly demonstrates your client's motivations in filing for divorce, Miss Holloway. Particularly his own words about, finally something worth having, and his anger at not being able to access my client's inheritance. Patricia's jaw tightened. She was a professional, but even she couldn't hide her frustration with her client. We'll need some time to consult, she said stiffly. Of course, Tom said pleasantly. Take all the time you need. But just so we're clear, my client will not be negotiating. The terms I outlined are final. Your client can accept them, or we can go to court, where a judge will review this recording and likely rule even more favorably for my client. Patricia gathered her papers. We'll be in touch. She stood up. Derek followed, but before leaving, he turned back to me one last time. You're really going to do this? He asked. Just cut me out completely? You cut yourself out, I said. The moment you chose money over me. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, but nothing came out. He just shook his head and walked out. The door closed behind them, and I sat there, trembling, as everything I'd been holding in for weeks finally broke through. You did beautifully, Tom said quietly. I almost lost it, I admitted. But you didn't. And more importantly, he did. Everything we needed to close this case came directly from his mouth. What happens now? Now, they'll realize they have no choice but to accept our terms. Patricia will explain the reality of the situation to him. He'll be angry. He'll probably try to fight it anyway, but within a week, maybe 2, he'll sign the papers. And then? And then you're free. I took a shaky breath, looked at the empty chair where Derek had been sitting. My dad knew, I whispered. He knew this would happen. He knew because he loved you, Tom said. And because he saw Derek more clearly than you could. That's not a failure on your part. That's just love. It makes us blind to things we don't want to see. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Your father's last act was protecting you, Tom continued. And he did it perfectly. You should be proud. I am, I said. I just wish he was here to see it. He is, Tom said gently. In every document, every instruction, every detail. He's right here. And he was. I could feel it. And then he said the one sentence that made the lawyers say, "That's it. We have enough." It took exactly 9 days. 9 days for Derek to realize he'd lost. 9 days for Patricia to explain to him, probably multiple times, that he had no case and no options. 9 days for him to accept that the man he'd underestimated, my father, had outmaneuvered him completely. On the 9th day, Tom called me. They've agreed to our terms. Derek will sign the divorce papers tomorrow. It'll be finalized within 60 days. I sat down on my couch, the phone pressed to my ear, and I felt nothing. No relief, no victory, just emptiness. That's it? I asked. It's really over? It's really over. You'll never have to see him again after the final signing. And even that will be quick. Just signatures. No drama. Okay. How are you feeling? I thought about it. Tired. Tom chuckled. That's normal. You've been through a lot. Give yourself time to process. Tom? Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For taking care of my dad's plan. For taking care of me. It was an honor, Tom said. Your father was one of the best men I ever knew. And you're just like him. We hung up, and I sat there in the silence of my apartment. The apartment I'd moved into after leaving the house Derek and I had shared. It was smaller. Simpler. But it was mine. The next day, I went to Tom's office one final time. Derek was already there, sitting in the waiting room with Patricia. He didn't look up when I walked in, just stared at his phone, his jaw tight. We'll do this quickly, Tom said, leading me into the conference room. It took less than 10 minutes. We sat at opposite ends of the table. Patricia slid the papers across. Derek signed without looking at me. I signed without looking at him. And just like that, 8 years of marriage ended with the scratch of a pen. Patricia gathered the documents. We'll file these with the court today. You should receive your final decree in about 60 days. Thank you, I said. Derek stood up abruptly, started walking toward the door. But then he stopped, turned back. I hope you're happy, he said. I looked at him. Really looked at him. At this man who'd shared my life, my bed, my home. This man who I'd trusted with everything. I will be, I said quietly. He shook his head. All that money, and you'll still end up alone. Maybe, I said. But at least I'll know the person I'm with actually wants me, not just what I have. He didn't respond to that, just walked out. Patricia lingered for a moment. For what it's worth, she said quietly. Your father did a remarkable thing. I've been practicing family law for 20 years, and I've never seen a trust structured so perfectly. He was a remarkable man. She nodded. Good luck, Miss Harrison. Thank you. And then she was gone too. Tom and I sat in the conference room for a few minutes in silence. How does it feel? He finally asked. I thought about it. Like closing a book I should have never opened. That's poetic. I smiled. My dad would have liked that. Tom pulled out one final envelope. Before you go, there's one more thing. Your father left this for you. He told me to give it to you after everything was finalized. My hands were shaking as I took it. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. The last letter my father would ever write to me. My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, it means you made it through. I'm so proud of you. I know this was hard. I know you're probably questioning everything, your judgment, your choices, maybe even my decisions. But I want you to know something. You did nothing wrong. You loved someone with your whole heart. You trusted someone the way you're supposed to trust your partner. You gave a marriage everything you had. That's not a weakness. That's a strength. The fact that he didn't deserve it, that's on him, not you. I spent the last years of my life building a fortress around you. Not because I thought you were weak, but because I knew you were strong. And I knew that strength might make you stay longer than you should, forgive more than he deserved, give chances he'd never earned. So I did what I could to make sure that when you finally saw the truth, when you finally realized you deserved better, you'd have the freedom to walk away. Money isn't happiness, sweetheart. But it is security. It's options. It's the ability to say no to things that hurt you without worrying about the consequences. That's what I wanted to give you. Not wealth. Freedom. The freedom to choose your own path, to build your own life, to never settle for someone who sees you as a transaction instead of a treasure. I won't be there to see what you do next, but I know it'll be amazing. Because you're my daughter. And you are stronger than you know. Live well. Love carefully. Trust wisely. And remember, you were never alone. I'm always with you. Love forever. Dad. By the time I finished reading, I was sobbing. Tom pushed a box of tissues across the table and waited patiently while I cried. He really did think of everything, I said when I could finally speak. He really did. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. So what now? Now? Tom smiled. Now you live. Exactly like he said. I left Tom's office that day and walked out into the sunlight. The air felt different, lighter, like something heavy had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't know what came next, didn't know who I'd become without Derek, without my father. But for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was. Hope? I drove to my father's grave that afternoon, sat in the grass beside his headstone like I'd done so many times before. You were right, Dad, I said quietly. About everything, about Derek, about the money, about me needing protection. The wind rustled through the trees. I wish you were here, I continued. I wish I could thank you in person. I wish I could tell you how much this meant. I put my hand on the cool stone of his headstone, but I think you already knew. You always knew. I sat there for a long time, just thinking, just feeling. And when I finally stood up to leave, I felt something shift inside me. Not grief anymore, not anger. Peace. My father hadn't just left me money. He'd left me wisdom, protection, a path forward. He taught me to see people clearly, to trust my instincts, to value myself enough to walk away from anyone who didn't value me. And most importantly, he'd shown me that love isn't just words, it's action, it's planning, it's protecting the people you care about even when you're no longer there to do it yourself. As I drove away from the cemetery, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I hope you know you didn't win. You'll regret this. Derek. One last attempt to hurt me. I stared at the message for a moment. Then I deleted it, blocked the number, and kept driving. Because he was wrong. I had won. Not because I got the money. Not because I walked away with the assets. But because I walked away free. Free from manipulation. Free from someone who saw me as a means to an end. Free from a marriage that was built on lies. My father hadn't just protected my inheritance. He'd protected me. And in doing that, he'd given me the greatest gift any parent could give their child. The ability to recognize my own worth. And if this story taught you something about trusting your instincts, about recognizing manipulation, about the power of unconditional love, please subscribe to this channel. Your support helps me keep sharing these powerful real-life stories. And who knows? Maybe one of them will save you one day, just like my father saved me. I realized my dad didn't just leave me money, he left me freedom.